Hello and welcome along. So, who were the worst bodyguards of a Primarch during the pre-heresy and heresy period? Well, I think there's only one candidate for this, and it has to be the Devourers of the World Eaters. And this is why. So, were the Devourers really that bad? Well, not to start off with. So, they had a bit of a tragic story, really, as a unit. And in many ways, they're the victims of Angron's personality, shall we say? Well, obviously, an Angron is the victim of the butcher's nails. So in many ways, they're just like the entire legion. They're the victims of Angron's decline into madness as the butcher's nails become more and more influential on his character. So once Angron had decided to lead the legion, he accepted the legion generally in the form that it was, like most legions were, in that most legions had an elite unit that was responsible for guarding and accompanying the leader of the legion. Now, that might be a Primarch if the Primarch's reunited with the legion, or it might be the legion master for where they haven't. So this was kind of standard across the legion. So Angron accepted this to start with, and because they're supposed to be an elite, they're responsible for a very important job. It was quite a position of honor. People were interested in the position. People wanted that position, and so that continued with the early World Eaters. And for anything that's desirable in the culture of the World Eaters, particularly once Angron had joined them, that meant you basically had to fight for it. So it became tradition that you fought for the position to enter this group that became known as the Devourers. Now, they named themselves that. Angron didn't call them that. And essentially, you would duel someone, and the victor would take the prize of being a Devourer. And this kind of suited the character, the culture of the World Eaters, kind of as they were before Angron, but also particularly once he had joined them with the kind of gladiator culture that he introduced even more. And so this is how it began, and there became a tradition of once you'd got the title of a Devourer, you were one of the Devourers, you kept that position until you either died in battle or someone else within the Legion took it from you by beating you in a duel, which the World Eaters did a lot of, because they had famously had these fighting pits where whenever they weren't in battle, they would constantly practice their skills and vie for honours by beating each other in these duels. And they were very violent duels. They weren't civilized, or they weren't. They were very much the kind of duel where you could lose a body part or even be killed quite easily. The Devourers at this point were a respectable, even honourable unit to be part of, and they had the task of bodyguarding Angron, and also being his honor guard. So, basically accompanying him to important meetings and being his representatives in that, giving him a bit of extra prestige, a bit of extra presence when you go to an important meeting with other Primarchs or other situations like that. That's the kind of role of an honor guard, which is across the Legion. So they had this role, and they also got access to the better equipment in theory, like in the other legions. So they got Terminator armor. They probably would have had better weapons, so mastercrafted weapons, things like that. So where did it all go wrong? So basically, well, imagine you're on the battlefield and you start the battle and you're next to Angron. Well, what does Angron do in a battle? He doesn't do anything like any other Primarch, really. He doesn't try and stand back and organize things. He doesn't lead a heroic charge through to eliminate an enemy or something like that. He just goes wild and goes rampaging off the battlefield, doing whatever the hell he wants, basically. And he's also a Primarch, so you can't keep up with a Primarch on a good day. So when a Primarch has no regard whatsoever for who's with them, it's impossible, essentially. So they would basically get left behind. They wouldn't be able to keep up with him. They wouldn't know. He probably sometimes wouldn't even know where he was. But even if they did, they'd very hard for them to ever get to where he was before he'd killed everybody that he'd tried to attack, and then he'd be off rampaging across to someone else, and completely unpredictably, at random, basically wherever the butcher's nails took him. And on top of that, they also obviously started to use the butcher's nails, as this was what Angron wanted. He wanted all the legions to start using the butcher's nails, and so they then became more and more unpredictable, unable to control themselves, And so basically, as soon as they got into the first fight they came across, they were lost to the battle. They couldn't go, oh, we better should go and find Angron and protect him. And now that brings us to the next point, which is, does Angron need protecting? I mean, in general, a Primarch doesn't really need protecting because they're so incredibly hard to damage, and they're so resilient they can recover so quickly as well from even massive wounds. The idea of a bodyguard for a Primarch is a little bit superfluous. It's kind of really they're there to kind of extend the Primarch's prestige. Like I said before, it's more of a symbolic role rather than a specifically, oh, if we aren't here, the Primarch's going to get murdered by someone, or if we're on the battlefield, the Primarch will get killed by that, by those other group of Terminators if we are here to protect him. It's not really like that. But although having a bodyguard does give a Primarch a bit of extra protection, because it gives them a little bit of extra warning that something is going to happen. It might give them some time to react that they wouldn't have otherwise had if there was no one else around, and it stops them from being simply outnumbered by sheer bodies. So there is probably a practical purpose to some extent to the bodyguards, and you do see this with other legions where their bodyguards do carry out some important roles, like that of giving that extra little bit of warning or help from time to time to a Primarch, even though the Primarch's level of ability is obviously so much above an Astarte that you might think it's kind of pointless. There are some famous instances where normal Astartes do significantly damage Primarchs when there's enough of them. So I think Robert Gilliman, for example, is all kind of certainly seriously wounded, and you could argue close to being killed by a group, sort of a section of Alpha Legion who are disguised as Ultramarines. And now he doesn't have any weapons in his armor on, and they do, but still, the point is, there are times when a Primarch is vulnerable, so it is probably advisable to have a bodyguard, even if their role is going to be mostly ceremonial. It also makes that Primarch much more effective on the battlefield if they have a surrounding group of elite troops who are genuinely, combat masters of the Legion, equipped with the best equipment and armor and weapons, and can, when he jumps into battle, they're there as well. They're just killing loads of other people while he's killing the people he can kill. Because even a Primarch is limited to the number of people he can kill at once. So it's still pretty useful. And so now, of course, however, Angron doesn't really think like that and doesn't think like most Primarchs. And so for Angron, at the beginning, he was kind of like, well, okay, it kind of makes sense. But as he got more and more insane, he basically like, this is ridiculous. I don't need people to protect me. This is embarrassing. In many ways, it was just annoying to him that these group of idiots had chased, basically trying to follow him around, looking terrible because they can't keep up with him, never actually reaching the fight before he'd already finished it. And it became, essentially, he started to look down on them. He didn't like them, didn't respect them. And when that happens, you can imagine you're in the Legion and your own Primarch doesn't like or respect a group within the Legion, then everybody else is going to start feeling that way. And so over time, the Devaras basically became like a bit of a joke within the Legion. Nobody really wanted to be one. Nobody respected them. And the fact that they kind of kept the pretense up of being this elite, being someone that the Primarch valued and respected when everybody knew that he didn't, made them even more embarrassing because they were kind of like, they were fakes, basically. So when it basically got to the point where people would avoid killing them because they didn't want to actually take their place, because it was just like a task nobody wanted, to become one of these Devaras. And over time, the Eighth Company, which is Khan, who was basically the lead, the second in charge of the Legion to Angron, his company, the Eighth Company, became the elite company within the Legion. But they didn't have the job of obviously protecting Angron, and they didn't have the job of trying to follow him around or anything, so they didn't pick up all the negatives of what the Devaras had. But the Devaras still existed, and so they just kind of carried on as this kind of embarrassing group of outcasts, spiraled down of the quality of the members, because the really good fighters wouldn't want to be in them, and so only the lesser fighters would end up in the Devaras. And so they kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy there, where they started off as a really effective and capable group. They became worse and worse as people avoided joining them. So it got to the point where even someone might be in a duel with one of these Devourers and would just instead of killing them when they could easily, it would just not. They would just embarrass them and walk off. And there was a point when Khan actually kills one of the Devourers in a duel, and he basically decided to say, "Well, I'm not joining them." Basically, he just said it's ridiculous, it's laughable that I would join the Devourers, even though technically he should have, because you're supposed to take replace the ones you kill. Eventually, they mostly died. Various other members of the Legion had killed them. They died in obviously normal battles. If they ever basically spoke to Angron, he'd kill them because he despised them so much. If they tried to talk him down or anything like that, try and persuade him to do anything different to what he felt like, he'd kill them, because he didn't, he had no respect for them. In fact, it was worse than that. Although he didn't have much respect for anyone, certainly as it went on and he became more and more insane. But he actually started to just actually actively dislike them, which is not a good place to be with a psychotic Primarch. And then eventually, obviously, the end of the heresy, the Legion breaks up into various warbands, and they just went their own separate ways and formed their own warbands. And are they the least effective Primarch bodyguards of the heresy period and before? Yes, I think so, because they never really did a job as either job of bodyguard. They didn't protect Angron, certainly, and they didn't add anything to his prestige, or they didn't function as an honor guard in any sense. They were just an unfortunate group who became derided and then eventually ended up being a joke, basically, amongst their own Legion, and an embarrassment. And that's their story. So, yeah, let me know what you think. Do you think that it was all entirely Angron's fault, or, well, at least the Butcher's Nails? Or do you think that they could have done anything different to maintain their reputation? Could they have tried to do things differently? Maybe not try and follow Angron into battle, just do something important and go and seize an objective, or just try and use their skills in a more effective way? Or was it always inevitable that anyone who was trying to work closely with Angron was going to fail? Yeah, let me know what you think. Like, subscribe, comment, and I will see you next time. Thank you very much.